Hello, welcome to another program in the series Peace is Possible. I am your host, Joe Wasserman. There have been vigils in West Hartford for ending the horror that is occurring in the Middle East, as there have been around the world. Today we have a guest who has been speaking out for those suffering in Gaza, Omar Antar. Omar Scott Antar is the co-founder of the Connecticut Palestine Alliance, or CTPA, and the email is palestinect.com, which is dedicated to engaging with elected officials, the media, and the public to bring justice and peace to Palestine. Omar Antar is also a volunteer for Justice for Palestine in Congress, or JPC, family of political campaigns, which are principally targeting the 5 congressional districts of Connecticut with third-party or independent candidates. Omar Antar obtained his AB, not BA, from Harvard University in biochemistry, a Master's of Science in biochemistry from Albert Einstein College of Medicine in New York, a Master of Science in microbiology from Columbia University, and a Master of Business Administration from UConn Stores in Healthcare Management. Omar, thank you for joining us today and for your work for peace and justice for those who have been denied food, medical care, shelter, and basic human rights in Palestine.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
I'm going to start with what's happening now with the situation with Iran. Tell us about the danger posed by Israeli nuclear weapons. Please review the evidence that Israel has nuclear weapons.
Yeah, so I'd love to discuss the history of the Israeli nuclear weapons. So first of all, as most people know, Israel has not declared itself as a nuclear weapons power. So they have a strategic ambiguity policy, meaning that they never say that they have nuclear weapons, but it's widely known and widely acknowledged that they do have nuclear weapons, and they in various ways they let countries know that they have nuclear weapons to indeed threaten them. So the nuclear weapons program of Israel started in the 1960s, the early 60s, especially with the help of France, ironically enough, and because of some of the scientific development of nuclear weapons by Israel, France benefited from and also aided Israel in developing its nuclear weapons program. But at that time, JFK was president in the early 60s, and he actually wanted to prevent Israel from acquiring nuclear weapons, but obviously his efforts were cut short with his assassination. But also Israel, by stealth and by stealing nuclear material from a place in Pennsylvania, were also able to obtain the nuclear material to further develop their nuclear weapons program. The next most significant milestone in the Israeli nuclear program is 1979. The reason is because when you develop nuclear weapons, being able to accrue the material and the technology and the know-how and the delivery mechanisms is all important, but if you can't test them, you have no idea if all your processes are working together. And so testing is very important, and it's also an indicator of a nuclear weapons program. And in 1979, there was the classic double flash that satellites over the Indian Ocean next to South Africa detected a nuclear test in the ocean. And because of this close collaboration between the apartheid state of South Africa, because this is back in 1979, before the de-apartheidization of South Africa in the 90s, because of that tight collaboration between South Africa and Israel back in 1979, they worked together to do the first nuclear test of the Israeli nuclear arsenal, and that's why, despite their denials, we believe they have a successful most countries' intelligence services believe that Israel has a successful nuclear weapons program, which we may have hundreds, maybe 200 nuclear weapons currently, so. So obviously the nuclear weapons of Israel is a key cornerstone of their military policy, and their ability to invade and attack all their neighboring countries, as they're doing very recently, both in Lebanon and in Syria, and of course in Gaza and the West Bank, and they even take up positions in Iraq to attack Iran. All that ability to act with impunity comes from kind of two principal factors. One is obviously the blank check that the United States gives them militarily and diplomatically. So in the UN, they cannot be, no UN Security Council resolutions will stop them. And militarily, the United States is spending a lot of its missiles and defensive and participation in the war in Iran to defend Israel. But the second, and even if the United States was out of the picture, they have their own nuclear arsenal, and so because of that, that gives them free hand to invade the different countries, its neighbors. And so unfortunately, as we see in the case of North Korea, and in the opposite case in Libya, as Joe has kind of talking before this conversation, obtaining nuclear weapons, unfortunately, because of how the West reacts to those who obtain nuclear weapons and those who do not, if you obtain the nuclear weapons, you become immune to attack, like in the case of North Korea. But if you don't, you are subject to attack, like in the case of Libya and now most recently Iran. And so Libya, they had an agreement with the Bush administration to kind of decommission their efforts to get nuclear weapons, but they were still attacked in 2010. And of course, the February attacks in Iran occurred because of the lack of nuclear weapons in Iran. And so, unfortunately, we have a perverse policy in which that incentivizes nations to obtain nuclear weapons, as opposed to our efforts to rid the world of nuclear weapons. And so, therefore, Israel's nuclear weapons arsenal is kind of a key destabilizer in the region, because it allows Israel to attack its neighbor with almost impunity. But thankfully, because of their difficulties in the current Iran war, they may be restrained, but that's at a cost of a lot of lives and blood and treasure, and of course, my particular view is that the anti-nuclear weapons peace movement should focus on Israel and denuclearizing Israel, and as a way of preventing nuclear war and a nuclear exchange, in the Middle East, particularly against Iran. But also, it would also involve lowering the temperature, because Pakistan has a relationship with Iran and Saudi Arabia, and so there is another nuclear power, involved in this conflict. It's more on the side, but there is a possibility of the destabilizing nature of the Israeli nuclear arsenal to cause an exchange that will involve more powers across the world, first to Pakistan, then India, China, Russia, and the United States, of course. And so it's very imperative that we eliminate all nuclear weapons. In my view, we should kind of start on the Israeli nuclear arsenal.
Okay, thank you. Does the focus on Iran's nuclear program divert us away from the danger posed by nuclear weapons in the hands of the 9 existing nuclear weapon powers, which by all accounts includes Israel? All evidence shows that Iran has not been developing a nuclear weapon. The leadership in Iran says they don't want to develop a nuclear weapon. Yet the focus is on Iran's nuclear program, and there's not a word in the media about Israel's nuclear weapons.
Yes. To give a little history and context, I think the Iranian leadership kind of had since 2003, the United States attacked Iraq, they had a kind of consensus about how to deal with nuclear weapons in 2003, and they decided to prohibit the development of nuclear weapons. And they based this on a fatwa, or religious ruling, that is in part derived from the prohibition in Islam to kill in war using fire. Because of the nuclear blast, is so high energy, so highly energetic that it vaporizes and basically fries any human or living or even inanimate object within its core range. That is a mechanism of killing by fire. And so, based on that religious ruling, the previous religious ruler who died in February of this year, he prohibited a nuclear weapons program. But there is talk currently, since February, of developing nuclear weapons, but only as a deterrent. And so, unfortunately, that brings us closer to the brink, and to have introduction of nuclear weapons in Iran, which will then trigger nuclear weapons in Saudi Arabia and elsewhere. So that is an unfortunate development, but it's all because of the attack by the United States, the illegal attack by the United States and Israel on Iran. So they again are not saying that they will use nuclear weapons as a primary defense or first strike policy, but they will develop them as kind of a deterrent, and unfortunately, as the North Korean case showed, they are effective in preventing attacks by the United States if you develop a nuclear arsenal, which is unfortunate, and which we try to avoid. We're kind of in dangerous territory, and the policy of focusing on Iran's nuclear weapons is, in many people's view, a distraction. It's really the issue really isn't the nuclear weapons, but of the independence of the Iranian regime from the United States global system. And so they use the nuclear weapons program, which is non-existent, as an excuse to impose sanctions and attack Iran because they are independent. And it's kind of significant in an economic sense, because Iran is an oil producer, and they can produce a significant amounts of oil that they can sell in a non-dollar denominated fashion, like the petro yuan, which is the Chinese currency. And so there are economic reasons why the United States wants to attack Iran or subdue Iran, and they use the nuclear program as an excuse. And as you said, the media never focuses on these issues, and they never mention, of course, Israel's nuclear arsenal, and they always try to use a scary excuse of the potential Iranian nuclear arsenal to attack and demean Iran. But unfortunately, because of their attack in February, they actually may get the nuclear arsenal that they claim to be so much opposed to. And one source of it could not only be its indigenous production of the nuclear material and the bomb, but also they could either purchase or be granted the nuclear weapons from Pakistan, because Pakistan is a nuclear power, declared one, and but also has some military relationships with Iran, not as formal, but there is a possibility that they will provide the nuclear umbrella to extend it to Iran.
So to be clear, Omar, what you're saying is that the attack, this illegal attack on Iran, actually created the conditions where Iran may actually develop or get a nuclear weapon.
Absolutely.
And prior to this attack, all evidence pointed to the fact that Iran was not developing nuclear weapons.
Correct. And this is not just an assessment of me and journalists, but also of the United States intelligence agencies. And they've done so for years and decades. And even so, most recently in last year, 2025, the DNI also reiterated the intelligence, United States intelligence community's position. Does Iran have a nuclear weapons program? Is that it does not, and it has abided by the JCPOA agreement by the Obama administration in terms of not developing a nuclear weapons or nuclear weapons program. But since February, they've kind of abandoned the JCPOA. They said that they're no longer bound by that agreement. They have not formally come out of the NPT, because they are a signatory to the NPT, or the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and which allows them legal rights to nuclear medicine and civilian nuclear energy, but it prohibits them from getting nuclear weapons. And so they're signatory to that. They have not broken that signature yet, but once they do, that's kind of the signal that they're on the path to nuclear weapons. So there is talk of developing nuclear weapons, but they haven't taken the action that kind of signals that it's going for sure.
Tell us about the proposals for a nuclear weapon-free or weapons of mass destruction-free Middle East.
Yeah, so actually this comes from the 1960s, because that's when Israel started its program in the early 60s. And it was principally through the United Nations. So it's the Middle East Nuclear Weapons Free Zone, which has been expanded to nuclear weapons and weapons of mass destruction. And it started in the 60s with Iran and Egypt. And they, in particular, in 1974, they had a joint declaration at the United Nations General Assembly. And more recently, in 2010, there was a proposed Helsinki conference, and that came from the NPT mandate, or the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty mandate. But unfortunately, that conference and its intended effects of a path to a nuclear weapons-free zone in the Middle East, that was shut down by the United States. Most likely to protect the Israeli nuclear weapons arsenal, even though it's undeclared. And so this effort, as we said, is mostly pushed by by Egypt and Iran, has been through the United Nations process, but has been stymied and kind of stalled over the years and decades. And unfortunately, we see the results of it in the wars that we see now.
What else is the corporate controlled media not telling us about the war on the people of Iran?
The media in the United States, obviously there's different forms of media now. So the corporate media, as your question is highly controlled, and through both corporate interests, but also indirectly and directly over the years by the American intelligence agencies. So it's well known that Operation Mockingbird provided funding in the 60s and the 70s for different media organizations in the United States, and but now in recent years you have open CIA directors or former CIA directors like John Brennan, and many of these CIA officers and even generals, especially during the time of the war, they're kind of like the talking heads of the corporate media, and so you don't even need to hide it anymore. You've got the CIA piped right into your TV, and so there are alternative forms of media, of course, but they're less well resourced, but they are informative, and they can offer an alternative and better and more sound point of view. But they're often, you have to find it on YouTube, you have to search for it. It's not as widely spread, but it's a kind of a silver lining to our current media ecosystem, in which people are moving away from the corporate media towards alternative media. But it has its own pitfalls as well, because not everything on the internet you can see is 100% accurate and true. So it takes a little media discernment or judgment to decide what is accurate or not accurate.
Yes, and there's still questions about the bombing of that school.
Yes, that actually brings up the issue of AI. So the question was, why was that school bombed in the opening day of the first strike, basically, of the Iran war in February? And the question is, was it deliberate? as some Iranians believe, they believe it's deliberate because the children were the children of IRGC officers. Was it negligence that they just had old maps and that they just never got around to checking whether they were accurate, or whether it was like hallucination by the AI? Because it's well known that AI has mistakes and hallucinations, as they call it, where they just confabulate just to fit the models, but what was pretty damning about that bombing is that it wasn't just one bomb and then you check to see if you got the target. There was multiple like second strikes, and so there could have been a possibility of holding off on the second strike to see if the bombing it was accurate or delivered whatever military purpose that the United States had, but they did not. And so that in a legalistic term, that provides culpability to the U.S. and that this was indeed a war crime. And so my suspicion is that it indeed was negligence on the U.S. military's part, and that they didn't update their maps. But that negligence comes with it culpability. It's maybe not as harsh a culpability as being a deliberate strike on a civilian school, but it is definitely still a war crime.
Tell us about the reports from Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, the UN, Doctors Without Borders, and other groups, other nonprofits, in regard to Gaza, West Bank, and Lebanon.
Off the bat, I mean, even though in elite circles, the United States and Israel, we should say that what happened in Gaza in particular is a genocide, and there is a definition of genocide that has about 4 points, which is the destruction in whole or in part of a population, and that is exactly what happened. And the evidence for the actions of Israel as being a genocide in Gaza comes from the statements of the Israeli officials themselves. They are the ones that declared the people of Gaza Amalek, or people, all men, women, and children, and even animals to be destroyed. And there's even discussions, mostly in Hebrew, which sometimes the Israeli politicians assume will not be translated and brought up in the West, that discuss the desire to have basically biological warfare, and that disease will to starve out, and disease will kill the population, because they openly declare that they intend to ethnically cleanse and settle Israel. When I say they, it's often the most right wing of the current Israeli government. So by this, meaning Ben Gvir and Smotrich, they are the most right wing flank of the current Israeli government. So by that standard, Netanyahu is actually a moderate, but his actions and policies have been driven by those right wing. So even though he's technically a moderate, meaning Netanyahu, his actions have been driven by the right wing, and so they are essentially equivalent. And so the issue of Lebanon happened later, but they, meaning the Israeli military, has declared their intention to act in Lebanon to be the Gaza model, and so they have declared that they will engage in the same processes they are engaged in Gaza in Lebanon, and they have done so, and they've raised different villages, and they've even been explicitly bigoted. They said, because there are Christian communities as well as Shia Muslim communities in that southern Lebanon region, and they said that if a Christian is harboring any Muslim, particularly Shia Muslim in this case, they will be targeted. And so you can't ask for a stronger connection to the Holocaust, in which Jewish people in Europe were hidden and protected by brave non-Jewish persons to protect them from the Nazis. They're saying, if you protect a Shia Muslim, we will come and kill you. And so it's pretty profound and disgusting.
Let's talk about the vote in Congress to cut off the weapons, because as long as the American people, through their tax dollars, are supplying weapons to the Netanyahu regime, the violence seems to escalate.
Yes. So there is a bill in Congress in the House of Representatives called H.R. 3565, or Block the Bombs Act, and that's the act to prevent bombs from being delivered to Israel. And so right now it obviously hasn't passed and hasn't even come close to passage, and it's only mostly Democrats who've signed on to it. Recently, Thomas Massie is the only Republican, I think, to sign on to it. But in Connecticut, until a month or two ago, no Connecticut delegation member of our five co-sponsored it. That changed about 2 months ago when Representative Johanna Hayes of the 5th Congressional District co-signed on it. And it's because of all the pressure on her, and in particular electoral threat, because the Justice for Palestine in Congress, our flagship effort was to primary or to run against her in the general election in 2024 with a campaign with Ahmed Darwish, and it was particularly on the issue of Palestine and the genocide in Palestine. And so that electoral threat and that efforts, I think, helped translate into her being the first in Connecticut to co-sponsor the Block the Bombs Act. And on the Senate side, there is the Senator Sanders had what they call JRDs, or Joint Resolution of Disapproval, which would attempt to block various military weapons, both guns, bombs, and militarized bulldozers. And so the latest one had 40 Democratic senators, 40 of the 47. Unfortunately, of those 7 Democratic senators who did not vote for it, one of which was Blumenthal. Murphy has been good on this for a while now, but Blumenthal did not vote with Senator Sanders to block the bombs through Senator Sanders' JRDs. But recent discussion has shown that he may be willing to change his mind on that, and that those discussions happened with him in person in Willimantic. I was there, and there is a group in Northeast Connecticut, the Northeast Connecticut Gaza Peace Group. In particular, her name is Alice Leibowitz. She had a conversation with him, and he said that he's open. And he brought this up himself. He's open to voting with Senator Sanders in future JRD votes. So that's hopeful, but we will hold him to account.
So I urge people to call Senator Murphy and Representative Johanna Hayes and thank them for their vote to cut off the weapons that are escalating the violence in the Middle East. But also to urge Senator Blumenthal and the other House representatives to vote for the Block the Bombs Act the next time it comes up. Tell us about the
Connecticut Palestine Alliance?
Connecticut Palestine Alliance.
Yes. So our website, as you said, is palestinect.com, and you can email us at info@palestinect.com. And so we help put together different lectures and events. Our most tried and true events are the vigils on Thursday at 5 p.m. in the Hartford area, Hartford hospitals, either St. Francis or the Yukon Farmington John Dempsey Hospital. But also there are ones, and those on Thursdays, and there also those ones on Mondays and Tuesdays at noon. The one on Mondays at Bridgeport Metro North train station, and the one in Tuesdays at 12 again is at the Yale New Haven Hospital at 20 York Street. So that's our most frequent event, but we also have protests against the war in Iran, which now is explicitly connected to Palestine, and many other events to come in the future, including maybe on Israeli nuclear weapons.
So how can people contact your organization?
So email is the best way, but I also do Signal. So Signal is my Signal handle is @PalestineCT.org. 01. That's my signal handle, Palestine CT.01, or the email, which is the traditional old-fashioned way, is info@palestinect.com.
Let me remind the viewers of a recent quote from President Trump. We can't take care of daycare. We're a big country. We're fighting wars. It's not possible for us to take care of daycare, Medicaid, Medicare, all these things. We're fighting wars. Should we sacrifice childcare, Medicaid, and Medicare to pay for a war without a clear mission or end? Or to pay for weapons that go towards war crimes in Gaza and Lebanon? That's the question to ask your congressperson if they did not support the resolution to cut off the weapons to the Netanyahu regime. We don't need to be sending weapons all around the world. We don't need to be sending more weapons to the Middle East. We don't need to be sending more weapons to Netanyahu. We don't need to be continuing with this illegal and immoral war on the people of Iran. We need to spend that money on things we need in our communities. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. I'm also a Medicare for All activist as well.
Great. So if we have a little more time, let's go into UNRWA and the funding for UNRWA.
Yes, so UNRWA is a crucial UN agency that basically supports half to 2/3 of the entire Gaza population. So UNRWA actually is the United Nations Relief Works Agency. That's what UNRWA stands for. And they have their funding, unfortunately, has been cut by the United States Trump administration. And I actually advocated on their behalf in Washington, D.C. And unfortunately, because of the funding mechanisms of the United States, unfortunately, it's mostly in the hands of the administration, in this case, Trump administration, which is hostile to UNRWA. So they are in dire straits, and to be honest, I don't know how they work or how they survive. But there are ways of donating to them, and I have personally donated, and I, of course, encourage members to donate. You can go to our website, and there is, if you dig a little deeper, there's a Norm Finkelstein lecture, and we associated that lecture with a donate button to UNRWA. So if you look on our PalestineCT.com website, there is a way to find the donation link to UNRWA.
Okay, thank you, Omar Antar,
you.
for your work. Please consider contacting the Connecticut Alliance for Palestine and getting involved in the struggle for peace. And thank you to our viewers for hearing out a view that's not being heard in mainstream media.
Thank you.